At this point, most of the objects that I had stored either in the garage or the basement have been sorted and placed into boxes. They're still for the most part inside, and this is about what's left. The more I started playing with how I wanted to arrange things being stored on this bottom shelf, the more I kind of realized that the shelf is too deep to really utilize all of the space. Additionally, all the room on top is a little bit more deep than I'll ever need unless I'm doing a very large woodworking project, but for the most part, the garage is not going to be for woodworking projects because I do have the vehicles stored here, and over time that'll generate a lot of dust and it could impact the paint on those. It also sticks out pretty far from the wall. If I did drop it back another foot or so, and that would give me an extra foot or so of room so that I wouldn't have to move the bike anytime I want to do something on the bench. Because I can use this for bigger working projects, I am going to keep it. I'm just going to move it down to the basement and then I'm going to replace it with something else. This is what I'll be using to replace that big bench upstairs. I'm going to be using a bunch of kitchen cabinets that I was actually able to get for free. If you shop around Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, or Amazon if they control the world in the future, you should be able to find that someone's just trying to offload a bunch of these and you can pick them up for either very inexpensively or for no cost at all if you just go get them yourself. Obviously, these aren't the prettiest cabinets ever. You can see there's a lot of dirt going down the sides. A bunch also that is caked into the shelves themselves. So these do require pretty deep clean, and that's what I'm going to do now. The mix that I'm going to be using for wood cabinets is a little bit of white vinegar, a little bit of hot water, and then a pretty good squeeze of dish soap. All you need to do is spray it on, let it sit for about 2 minutes and soak out most of the junk. Then you wipe it away with a towel or a paper towel. Some people also like to follow it up by washing it down with just straight water to try to get any of the vinegar off, but because these are only going to be in the garage and they're going to be pretty greasy most of the time, that's not really super critical for me. My other option for these was to try to repaint them or restain them to match everything else in the garage, but it's really difficult and a huge pain to repaint cabinets. The level of effort's pretty much going to be wasted. That being said, I'm not going to show it, but I'm going to go ahead and do the deep clean on all of these. I'm just going to resume the video after everything's set. At this point in time, all the cabinets that I have down in the basement have been cleaned up, and I have removed the workbench in here. I actually had to disassemble it to get it out of the garage and into the basement through the door. As you can see, everything that was underneath it is just kind of strewn about right now. We also had a snowstorm between pulling in these from outside and getting things off of the workbench just so I could get the workbench downstairs. You can tell this is kind of a disaster, and it doesn't really stop there. If you also look inside, as I said, I was organizing a bunch of this stuff, and it's just kind of commandeering the inside space of the house as well. Most of the things both out here and there in the house are going to be stored normally within the cabinets that I'm going to be putting in. However, I obviously can't put them in right now because too much is in the way. At this point, the next step is for me to try to clean this up so I can actually get the cabinets physically in here and then installed. Once I have my storage solutions in, I can actually get everything tidied up.
And for the first time in this video, I get to say this yet again, I cannot stress enough, you should move everything out of this space as early as you can in the project so you're not doing this, yet again, like I am doing.
Everything on this wall that I'll be putting the cabinets on is now cleared out to the point that I can get the cabinets physically in here and line them up in place. Before I do, I am going to install a couple other storage solutions that I'm going to have farther down on the wall because the cabinets are also going to make it harder to maneuver over there once that's in place. This is probably going to be the worst and tackiest transition of all time, but here it goes. These are my storage solutions. These are 2 shelves that I made because of how long it took me to make them and because I literally don't have enough space on my hard drive to store all the footage to make these 2. I'm not going to be doing a separate do-it-yourself video on these because these 2, especially this one, are a lot more involved. It took me about a week or 2 of all my free time. This one is pretty easy. It's just this vertical on both sides, and then you have a bottom shelf, a front, and a backer plate. Just figure out how tall your shelves should be. This shelf here you can see is just 2 angled bits of a 1x4 that I cut uneven. I did it about 2/3 and 1/3. And this bottom shelf here, I got some holes in. You'll see what those 2 shelves are for in a minute. Rotating our attention to this one, every shelf is specifically sized for something that I had in mind. You'll see what that all is in a sec. These are made almost entirely out of 1x4s except for this dowel here. That is a 5/8 dowel rod. The total cost for both of these between the wood, the stain, and all the screws and hardware to assemble it was about $70, give or take. Jumping ahead here, this is where I decided I'm going to be hanging these. This is going to go right under the tire rack. Size-wise, this looks pretty good centered underneath it. It's not too much less wide than that. Initially, I was a little bit worried about how far this sticks out from the wall because I was going to use this as a bike lane to get out. However, upon closer inspection, I got this big bolt hanging out of the foundation anyhow, so I need some clearance to remind me to not clip that. Now we know where these are going to be hung. I'm going to put them up on the wall now. I'm going to be using the same cabinet screws that I used for the tire rack above because these will have some weight on them.
Just like we did for the tire rack that's hanging above, we're going to mark the center of this shelf because we know there's a stud located along the center line of where the shelf's going to be hung. Also, like we did for the tire rack, we're going to get the screws started in the location that the studs are going to be so that when we hold this up against the wall, we can just screw it in without needing an extra pair of hands. Trying to line up the shelf and get it level is going to be a little more difficult than the tire hanger, however, because we're working off of 2 points of reference. The first is the parallel bar from the bottom of the tire hanger, and then the second is going to be the foundation line below. As you can see, I had to back the screws out a few times to readjust the shelf to get it just right. For hanging the smaller shelf on the right, we can reference off of the vertical right side of the left shelf because we know that that's correctly placed. The easiest way to do this is by measuring the distance between the two shelves at the top and the bottom of this new shelf that we're hanging, as you'll see me doing now.
These two are now hung up. As you can kind of see there, I wasn't really happy with how square it was, especially when doing this first one. I also was not happy with how this first screw was centered on the stud, so between that and how it wasn't quite level, and because I normally have the Mustang here, I don't want to worry about it falling off at any point for any reason. Without further ado, I am going to start storing things on these shelves, and that way you can see what they're for, and then I can get everything cleared out of the house. If you haven't already figured it out, this first shelf here is going to be most of my car chemicals. All the tapes that I've got, electrical, masking, whatever. Down on the bottom is things like my greases. I've got the big tub and the brake caliper grease, as well as all my gasket makers and silicone. And next to that is my detailing station. This has enough space for all of my detailing supplies, even though they're not all on here yet. I've got a clothes bin for my microfiber towels, so that way they don't accumulate dust. Car wash shampoo, the pressure washer, the space up here. I've got some Back to Black and a few other spray cans kind of like those that are specific to detailing. The brushes I currently have are all hung. I got room for the wax and the clay bars. This area here is going to be some nice drying slats for either the microfiber mitt or the sponge. I sized it specifically for those. And the intent for these bottom slats is after I wash the vehicle, these are going to be my wash and rinse buckets. I'm not going to normally have the rags in here. What I plan to normally do for storing these is after a wash or a wax, I'm going to flip these upside down like this, and that way they can appropriately drain out through the slats on the bottom. As a result, you see I don't have an upper backer, and I only have a little lip there on the bottom to prevent them from hitting the back wall, and that's because I plan to store them like this upside down most of the time. All the storage space on this shelf system is designed specifically for things that I normally use, and everything was sized accordingly. That's another reason why I didn't do a do-it-yourself video on this, is because the involvement of figuring out all the things I had and exactly what sizes they needed that I could still make fit in the space was not really a quick or easy process. That being said, I am very happy with how both of these came out, and they've already freed up a lot of space in the house. I gotta track down a few more things I have stored around the house to finish filling out these shelves, especially that top row, and then I'm gonna continue with the rest of the project. I've gotten all the cabinets upstairs from the basement and they're in here. Now it's time to figure out how I want to organize them. Because they are going against this back wall, it's going to go from this corner out. It's only going to have that end side exposed. Because it's the only side that'll be exposed, I'm not really too worried about how the rest of the sides of the cabinets look, but I want to pick the prettiest one to go on that end. So I've already gone through all of these, and this seems to be the cleanest side one. So I can put that one on the end, and then I'll build everything back from there. So with that said, I'm going to take a final look at things that I want to store in here and then figure out how I want to orient these cabinets.
In reality, this actually took me a good amount of time to figure out, and then I just went back and took another take where I got a nice clean shot from start to finish to make it look like I knew what I was doing.
Based on the types of things I'm looking to store in it, this is the layout I decided on in my cabinets. I do have one wall-mounted cabinet that's going to go up top. That's still in the basement. So what I'm thinking at this point is, depending on where that sits and what I want to store in there, it might look weird with the pegboard next to it at only half the height or something. So I'm really going to have to play with that once that upper cabinet's hung. What it's really boiling down to overall, though, is that there's no one method I've decided that I'm going to go with no matter what. Basically, I won't be able to decide until I get these all installed and leveled out. I get a workbench on top of it, and then I get the upper cabinet installed. Once all that install and the bench top is completed, I'll figure out what I have left for storage space after I move the remaining boxes I have into those cabinets. What I'm thinking at this point is that if half of these are unfilled, then I can utilize that space to just store the hand tools in there. Otherwise, if I need the additional space, maybe the pegboard will make more sense.